Hey guys, very welcome to another episode of the Strategy Podcast. As you know, we're doing a series with Chief of Staffs, and it's a very interesting role that we're trying to explore. Something which has taken the startup ecosystem by storm. A lot of tech companies today are looking to have these roles fulfilled, and it's a very challenging role, right at the fulcrum of operations and strategy. So today we have with us Ritika Mathur. She is with Grant Thornton, and she's the chief of staff to the COO, if I'm right. So
CEO.
to the CEO, I'm so sorry, and she's going to help us understand, what this role is about. What are the challenges that you foresee? What impact do you have in an organization? And as we all know, management consulting is a very difficult industry. It's very challenging. It's people oriented, so I'm pretty sure that's another big challenge to handle. So Ritika, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited.
My first question to you, Ritika, is just your background. If you can start with where you're from, and just share the initial journey of your life, and then
Yeah,
to the point, to how did you get this?
yeah, absolutely, Rohit. So I actually hail from Lucknow. That's my hometown. That's where I was born, bred, and educated. Essentially moved to NCR around about like a decade back, 2010. That's when I started working. So yeah, I mean, I had been a science student up through my graduation, but then I sort of realized that I wanted to get into more the corporate side of things. So that's when I ended up doing an MBA. And from there, essentially, is when I moved into the domain of management consulting. I started my first job was in S&P Capital IQ. I was there for about 1.5 years. Then I moved to one of the big four firms. I was in EY for around about the same time. And then 2013, Grant Thornton happened for me. I never thought I'd be in one single organization for like 7 years. I'm coming to almost 7 years now, but it's been a very exciting journey for me in this firm. So yeah, so I think so. Even in Grant Thornton, I've done all through my career for 10 years. I've done very diverse kind of roles. Chief of staff was the latest and the most unique role I have done in the course of my 10 years of career. I've moved into this current role in the last 2 years, 2018 actually. So yeah, that's basically when how it
So
has panned out.
interesting. And let me unpack your journey at Grant Thornton, because that's where all the action has happened. Where did you start there? What was your starting point, and
So
how
I
did
have
the journey
yeah
happen till the chief of staff?
Yeah. So I have always been in the consulting, domain with market research primarily as my key domain area of expertise. When I got into Grant Thornton, I was in a very different kind of a role. For the first few months, the role that I was inducted to was a more client service kind of a role. We were doing setting up a team for key account management, and I essentially started into that because that was one area that I wanted to explore. But around about that time within Grant Thornton, we were setting up a team which was going to focus on market research and analytics. And the gentleman who was setting that team up, who's our current CEO, sort of reached out to me because in EY I had been in a very similar role. So he reached out to me, if I would like to be a part of that team. So that's how I got inducted into that team. I was one of the people who it was a founding team of that particular market research unit. Yeah, so I was one of the 6 people who sort of put that up, set that team up. I had some really good times there. A lot of learning happened to me there, and I was in that role for around about 3 years before I got the opportunity to. I was offered the opportunity rather to be the chief of staff to Shesh, who's our CEO. The way it happened for me was that the chief of staff role in our firm is it's more like a talent development program, and it's a tenured role. So you select the chief of staff, the CEO selects the chief of staff for 2 years. So my predecessor was just finishing his tenure in around 2018, and the opportunity opened up, and I had had the good fortune of working with Vishesh on a couple of projects before that. So he reached out and offered me the opportunity, and I obviously loved it up because it is a very coveted role in the organization, and I was just, I was like, there's no way I'm going to let this go. So yeah, that's how it happened.
Interesting. So, moving from a client-facing role where there's a lot of interaction from with external stakeholders, suddenly
Yeah.
into the organization and inward facing, right?
Yeah.
Was it difficult for you to adjust?
Um, so again, I think the reason why I wanted to get into a chief of staff role was because, like you said, in the last 8 years of my career, I had that opportunity to interact with clients to see how the other side works, right? What are the kind of things that the clients require? What are the kind of conversations we need to have with them from a commercial aspect as well. But I was also very keen to understand from a strategy point of view, how does it all come together? What is the big picture, right? Um, and a role like chief of staff, when I spoke with people who had done this role before, there had been 3 chief of staff before me, and outside of the organization as well. That's what I realized, that this role gives you that amazing vantage point to see, how everything comes together, how leaders think, how all units beyond their silos need to come together to form, a single organization which functions on a uniform strategy. So that's why I really wanted to kind of get that experience, because I knew getting back into the client service role will eventually happen for me. But this role for 2 years is going to give me a lot more tools in my arsenal, which I can take back to my clients and actually help them navigate through their own challenges as well, right? So
No, the reason I asked this is because my background as a management consultant for I recognized in that role, although you get to interact with a lot of different individuals across industries, but
yeah,
you're eventually specializing in a specific area, right? In my case, it was transactions.
yeah,
Now, from that very specialist role, the role of a chief of staff is a generalist. The way I look at it from an outside perspective, because now you're not looking to specialize in just strategy. It's strategy.
yeah,
It's also communications, right?
yeah,
Kind of drilling down the vision of the CEO and the executive team
yeah,
across the
exactly.
organization. It's
Yeah,
also about a lot of operations, hands-on.
yeah,
So
yeah.
from that perspective, when that shift happened, why didn't you just share your initial experience of the first 30 days when you got into that role?
Yeah.
How did you prepare for it?
Yeah. So absolutely, I think you summed it up very well, Rohit. It was challenging, coming from a market-facing role, which was in a way very structured, because even though you are interacting with diverse clientele, you still have a very defined scope of the things that you are focusing on, right? You have an expertise, you have a team that you lead, and you have the people you can actually go ahead and work with in terms of delegation. And from there, coming into a role which, like you said, is generalist, it doesn't have like a defined job description. It is a little bit of everything. It was challenging. I think specifically the first, I would say, 2 months were the most challenging that I have had in my career. Simply because it also is difficult, or it was rather difficult for me, because I was coming from a middle management position wherein I was leading a team of 15 people into a role which effectively had no team under me, right? So from so just transitioning from that, and also, like you said, just the sheer volume of information you get in the beginning itself, it's very overwhelming. This role is extremely fast paced. So I remember the first week that I got into this role, my CEO was presenting every single day of the week, like 5 days in a week, he presented an external forum. So every single day's presentations and the external briefings we had to work on. And one of that, in fact, was a session that he was moderating, which was organized by Niti Aayog. He was moderating a panel of almost 15 to 20 industry leaders on a topic which was around mobility and logistics, and it was a topic neither him nor I had any clue about. So we actually I spent literally 2 weeks reading every single thing I could get my hands on, summarized it for him. He read it through as well. I'm very lucky that I have a CEO who sort of, is very, very adept at being able to, absorb all of it and actually present it. So a lot of our flaws kind of get masked. But yes, I mean, just the pace of the role and the sheer volume of information and the kind of tasks that come your way, that can get very overwhelming in the beginning. So yeah, I mean, so if you ask me how the first 30 days went, it was baptism by fire, if I would call it. But it sort of set the tone for me in terms of what kind of things to expect from the role in the coming 2 years.
I can gather one thing from this, this conversation. Um a lot of projects which just sprout, out of
Yes.
nowhere,
Yeah.
like this
Exactly.
conference and back-to-back
Yeah.
conference.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then supporting these activities with those long-term things that the CEO has to do. How does that
Absolutely.
balance happen, and what is your role there?
So, one of the critical things as a chief of staff that you have to be very, that's a skill that you need to learn is having a structured approach to things, right? So, no 2 days are going to be the same for you. Every single day when you come to work, you have to define what your priorities are for that day without losing sight of the long-term priorities that also need to get delivered at some point of time. But it's very important for you to learn how to organize yourself and to organize the information that you have access to, so both in the way you archive your information on your system and how you structure your thoughts is a critical skill to have in this role, right? So program management, to the extent not just managing projects and managing, sort of making sure that the projects and the programs that are underway in the organization are on track. It's also just your own to-do list, which you need to sort of structure and prioritize on a daily basis, sometimes on twice a day, because things change so quickly here. So it is a balance, absolutely, like you said. It is something that you learn through experience, and you also, it depends also, in the scale and the priorities of the organization at that point of time. So you need to be very well aligned to your executive to understand what is it that his focus area is at that point of time, and try and align yourself and try and shadow him to see how, that you're not working on things which are sort of not, which are at that point of time sitting in isolation and not exactly aligned to what he's trying to do. So that's how I maintain the balance. I check and recheck whether that is something that is absolutely critical at that point of time.
Interesting, because the last conversation I had with Anvita Tikhane, who's the chief of staff at Baby Chakra, which is like a high growth startup. I'm realizing that there is a lot of similarities in in organized structure like management consulting. It's as much chaotic in your position as chief of staff as it is in a young growth startup. There is those similarities, because she was coming back to again and again how structured your thought has to be, and how you have to be supremely organized in your work and your approach to kind of prioritizing things, right? And tell me about your conversations with the executive team and the CEO, because I'm pretty sure when you got into that role you were fairly young, and which means now dealing with, especially in management consulting, people who are way senior. How did those conversations happen for you? Because I remember my days, it used to be very difficult if I had to have those conversations with somebody who was like 15 years more into the business than I am. How did you manage that?
Um, so honestly, in the I've been also very lucky that the kind of leaders that I have worked with have been very receptive to the conversations that I have with them. But I've realized that in this particular role, there is a certain gravitas that the office carries as well, right? So you are the conduit. So you have to just remember that your role is to be the conduit, and that communication point who is essentially sharing the information that is coming from the office of the CEO, to your senior leaders as well. Absolutely, tact is very critical. Communication skills are very critical. The tone, the tenor, the timing of your conversation also matters. But I have realized, and this is not just in your, when you're dealing with your seniors. Remember, you are, as a chief of staff, it's a very ironical nomenclature, because when you're called the chief of staff, you essentially do not have staff under you. The way it works is that, exactly. So there's nobody reporting into you. I mean, but the way you actually end up getting things done is by collaborating with your colleagues who are your peers, right? So it's not just dealing with the seniors wherein that communication skills are important. It is also this, the same principle that applies when you're collaborating with your peers as well. So the way you communicate, it's essential that it's not supposed to be instructional, right? It is supposed to be essentially you are the one who's communicating the information that is flowing from the office of the CEO, and collaborating with your seniors and your peers to see how that particular vision of your CEO gets executed. You're not telling them how to get things done. You're telling them what needs to get done and then working with them on how it will eventually get executed. So as long as that flow of communication is very evident in the way you are interacting with them, that's the best way of actually going ahead and making sure things get implemented.
It's also important that you are taking seriously, because you can't be throwing around the CEO's name all the time.
Yeah.
That's also very important.
That's
Otherwise, people would
yeah.
start respecting you or start listening to you, taking you
Yeah.
seriously.
That's the sure shot way, because even if you are the chief of staff, the point is you're also their colleague, right? So at the end of the day, that's a sure shot way of making sure that things. So at the end of the day, anything will get implemented in the right way only when there is accountability at the level of people who are actually going about doing it. And that accountability will come when they will feel that they are the ones in charge and not the chief of staff. The chief of staff is basically facilitating and being that integrator who is helping them sort of get the kind of tools that they need to get that particular project or that particular task done. But at the end of the day, they are the ones who are the experts. Simply because I'm in this current role wherein I get to tell them what is the vision of the CEO doesn't necessarily make me the best person to sort of take a call on what is the right way to go about it. And I need to remember that as well. And I need to sort of project that in my conversations as well, that while I'm sharing with them what is the vision of the CEO and I'm helping them execute it, I'm at no point of time telling them this is the way to go about it, because they are the ones who are the experts in it. And I'm just sort of helping them, making sure that things get done.
I'm just curious, how many times do you speak with your CEO on any given day? Is it like very structured every morning? We're going to have this like 15, 20-minute, half an hour conversation where we set the key priorities of the day. And then maybe we have these weekly meetings where we're setting the key priorities for the week and the month, or the long-term plan. So how does this, long-term and short-term come together?
Yeah. So we definitely have weekly meetings. Me and my CEO, we catch up every Monday morning to sort of finalize, looking on his calendar, what exactly are the things which he's which are the meetings he's attending, and therefore what is the briefing that is needed. Then what needs to get done for the week, what are the long-term priorities as well, right? So that weekly catch-up definitely happens no matter what. And then it depends, like, every single day we end up having a conversation about specifics that, we might need to action. We've got WhatsApp to actually get, to-do lists as well. So every single conversation of mine, frankly, becomes a to-do list for me, which is kind of pretty, which is sort of obvious, right? Yeah, so we do have structured conversations, absolutely, wherein I make sure that everything that is on the agenda gets covered. That agenda formulation is my responsibility, and then it depends on wherever the requirement is, whenever the requirement is.
Are the priorities set by you, or is it the CEO guiding you into what's important?
Yeah. So the priorities and the vision obviously has to come from the executive, right? On what is it that we are looking to achieve. That direction comes from the CEO. I am the process manager. I am responsible for making sure that the execution gets done. So a lot of pushback or a lot of upward communication happens from my end as well on what is it that is needed to get done to execute his vision. So the direction and the guidance in terms of where is it that we want to move, where is it that we want to go, comes from the executive, and everything that needs to get essentially everything that we need to do to make sure that gets executed.
So it's not a one-way conversation.
It can't be. When you are in a chief of staff role, it should never be a transactional conversation, because the moment it becomes one-way instructions, then you have also limited how much you end up learning, and the entire, I think there's a lot of benefit for the executive and for the chief of staff, and being in a in that sort of a, shall I say, working relationship, which is a two-way communication, right? Because you also sort of sometimes end up as a proxy sounding board for your CEO, and also you are the person who can give him the vision of how a particular process is expected to work, and therefore what is it that is needed, that we need from him, in terms of escalation as well. So it can't be a one-way instruction conversation. It shouldn't be, at least.
Yeah, true. Tell me something. If I've been looking at chief of staff jobs these days in startups. If you just search for the phrase chief of staff on LinkedIn, you will have like gazillions of jobs coming in. And I'm looking at the requirements in terms of the skills that they ask for. So one thing which clearly stands out, job after job, is it's great if you have a background in management consulting or strategy or venture capital. So what's your take on this? Do you think it better prepares you for it? Is it a must-have to have that?
Yeah. So I don't have a background in investment banking and venture capital, frankly. I think it depends on which kind of organization you're going for, frankly. If you are in a venture capital firm wherein a lot of your responsibilities shadow that of your CEOs, which is around, I don't know, negotiations, which is around deal structuring, then maybe that will be a good skill to have.
These are tech startups which are asking for the chief of staff to have that background, background either in management consulting or venture capital. I guess like part of the job must be fundraising, which is why he's looking for somebody with that background.
Exactly. Like I said, so it's a very unique role in the sense that no two organizations will ever have a standard requirement. It depends on what stage of evolution the firm is in. Depends on what exactly are they looking for this role to achieve, and that's what defines what are the kind of skill sets that they need in the person who's playing this role, right? So I do not have an investment banking and venture capital skill set, and I don't think that would have, in the kind of role that I am in right now, it's not something that I have ever felt was a hindrance, the lack of those skills. Management consulting, yes, I have found it to be beneficial because simply because of the fact that I understand the client requirements. I understand, having been in a client-facing role, it's easier for me to be able to provide my inputs in some of those discussions when we are discussing strategy, when we are discussing people. So yes, from that aspect, I felt that it is useful, and same goes for MBA as well, right? So when we are defining organization strategy, some of those frameworks and tools, it's good to have knowledge about them. So just so you are able to understand a lot more and you're able to provide inputs as well as required. But I wouldn't say these are, that you cannot succeed in this role without these particular skills. Because even though I have an MBA, I realized the kind of skills that you learn while on the job in this 2 years is way more than what you will ever learn in the classroom, because effectively you are in a 2-year executive MBA role on the job. It helps.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, so I was just saying that it helps. I wouldn't deny that it helps. All of these kind of skill sets, absolutely. But I wouldn't say that anybody without an MBA degree or without a management consulting background is completely not suited for the role. It totally depends on how you structure this role for yourself and what the firm's requirements are as well, frankly.
Yeah, which brings me to my next question, which was around skills. And I was trying to understand in a generalist role, it's more less technical knowledge that we bring in, as an MBA or an engineer or an accountant, and more human skills or soft skills.
Yeah.
So what are those skills if you would look for a replacement for your role and are evaluating a candidate? What would you look into that CV that makes you instantly recognize, like, this is the guy I want to talk to or meet?
Interesting question. I think the first thing I would always ask somebody that I'm interviewing is how comfortable that they are working in an unstructured environment, because it is critical that the person is a self-starter. Because remember, your reporting partner.
You would think in a
Sorry?
management consulting, I'm saying that question might stun him in a management consulting firm, somebody talking about unstructured.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Actually, there's the different perspective. I mean, a lot of times the kind of clients and the scope, specifically in management consulting,
True.
the scope of work is so diverse that that is probably somebody who's been in a
It's
management
always
consulting.
unstructured. That's like my experience.
Yeah,
It's always
exactly.
unstructured. More unstructured than structured. Bigger the company, bigger the client.
Yeah, but yes, I think that is one thing that is critical for anybody who's getting into this role to be aware of, that it is going to be a very unstructured role. It is something you cannot, I mean, you cannot expect that you will get instructions or constant guidance in terms of what next for you. You have to be self-starter in the sense that, you know, you have to figure out when on the role on what are the things that are required for you to CEO's time being more effectively utilized and your leadership's time being more effectively utilized. So those kind of ideas, those kind of inputs have to come from you, and and therefore, you know, you have to define what your day is going to look like on every single day basis. So anybody who is looking for a very process-oriented, you know, structured kind of role, I will be very candid. This role is not for you, because this requires you to be agile. This requires you to be okay with that sort of uncertainty. I think the second thing I would look for is how, you know, maybe an experience in program management. You know, somebody who has shown that kind of experience in being able to manage not just a project but a portfolio of projects. How have they implemented a process around, you know, monitoring, around reporting, and around evaluating those particular projects, and being able to report on them as well, because that is another big part of your job. I have, that's one area we are still evolving in as well, you know, setting up a PMO in the firm. And that becomes your responsibility, making sure that the things that get discussed at the leadership team meetings, you know, get recorded, get the information gets disseminated, and there is sort of a monitoring mechanism to make sure that things are on track or not. So anybody who has sort of, you know, displayed that in their experience is something that I'll be very interested in. And I think communication skills, absolutely. I mean, somebody who has that kind of, you know, who is able to comprehend what is being said and being able to translate and communicate in a articulate and a structured manner, that is very, very important, because miscommunication at this level to the senior partners or to, you know, to your peers can have a cascading effect, right? It starts a dominoes effect. Then if you have miscommunicated, they will end up working on something which is not the right thing, and then it's just wasting time for everybody. So these 2-3 things I think are going to be critical if I were to look at, you know, somebody who's going to come into this role.
You know, the other day, Ritika, I was listening to Satya Nadella, and he was addressing the batch at Stanford, and he was talking about when he took over as the CEO. One of the first things he started imbibing in the firm and in the executive team was a growth mindset, right? Which is basically, you know, trying to always learn new things, unlearn the old, and that, you know, 1% improvement every day. As the shadow role which a chief of staff is, how important do you think that that mindset is to have that growth mindset imbibed and present in you? Do you think that's also an important criteria for a chief of staff?
I mean, actually, I think that is I think that is an important mindset for every professional in any role, you know, that they are in, irrespective of whether they are in a chief of staff role, irrespective of, even when I go back into my business, I don't think as a professional I'll be able to grow without that kind of mindset, right? Um, and in the kind of professions that we are in, which are very cognitive, you know, which are very skill based, very and they keep evolving, it is important for you to keep thinking about what next, how can you make what you're doing better, and how is it that you make not just your life but the people who are working with you, their life better as well, and think from that perspective. So my short answer to your question is, I think it is extremely important to have that mindset, and not just as a chief of staff but just as a professional, for you to be able to grow,
You know,
do something more, and you know, keep that drive going. It's critical.
Right. I'm also looking at a lot of these young startups, when they advertise for these roles, they're not looking for a lot of experience. Now, if I am reading
Yeah.
job description, as a fourth year, you know, engineering student or an MBA, just getting out of college, and I am remotely interested, how should I prepare myself for the role? So uh, I could get shortlisted for it. What should I try to um, outline in those 2 pages of my resume that makes me him tick for me? And also, what are the things that I should keep in my mind when I'm applying for this role? One obviously is,
Yeah.
as you pointed out, you have to be, I think, great at organization. You have to be very good at ability to kind of manage multiple tasks. Program management becomes an important skill to have.
Yeah. Um, I think so. Like I said, this role is very difficult for you to have like a single standard resume for, because if you are working if a tech startup which is just in a in early stages of incubation or early stages of incorporation is looking for a chief of staff role, the requirements might be very different from what a firm like Grant Thornton would have. And frankly, if I were looking at it, the first thing I will do is have that conversation to even understand what exactly are they looking for, what is the kind of skill set that they're looking for, and beyond that, what are the kind of KRAs that they are going to that somebody in this role is going to have, what is success going to look like for them. That's the first question I would ask. Not just to tailor my resume, but also to understand if that is something that I want to even get into, right?
Right.
So that's the first thing I would do. Understand the scope, understand what is it that the firm requires, whether you are ready to take it up, and then accordingly see if your skill set, your experience, how is it that it is conducive or congruent to to what they are looking for. So yeah, so if I am somebody who's looking at it, that's the first step I'll start. Just understand a little bit more about the company, about their requirement, and about what exactly is this role going to do. Because going by a standard set of JD is not going to function when you're talking about the role of chief of staff.
you
It's
know
very wrong.
uh, I just want to be the devil's advocate here and ask you, who should not apply for this role? What kind of people should clearly avoid going here? What kind of mindset?
Yeah. Um, so I'll
Because
be
a
very
lot of
candid
people,
with.
where it comes from is, a lot of people find this very attractive, to be in the
Yeah.
CEO's office. I'll have a
Yeah.
lot of power, I'll have a lot of clout, but they don't recognize what's the other. Side of the coin. So I just want to ask you, what's that other side?
Absolutely. I think it sounds like a very glamorous role in the sense that that's a common perception that you are functioning as you're the one person who has the ear of the people who can make or break your career. You have all kinds of information that you require, which is true. I mean, I'm not going to even deny that. But what also comes with it is an added stress of responsibility, because remember, the more visible you are, the more is the impact of any single mistake that you make, be it in terms of information. You make one single typing error in your presentation, and the world would know that you made
You
that
can't
mistake.
afford to make responsible
You cannot.
make
It's
mistakes
exactly.
in this role.
Exactly. It is that role wherein accuracy and agility go hand in hand. You cannot compromise on either. And anybody who is, I mean, that is something that you have to understand and reconcile with before you get into this role.
So if I'm a little
Uh,
laid back, I should definitely not go for something like this.
no, that's not the case. I mean, you learn, frankly, I was not the kind of person who was very detail oriented even when I got into this role. But after I made a few mistakes and that got flashed on screens for the world to see, I sort of realized it and learned it the hard way. But so, like I said, anybody, I think you have to just be aware of these things. And but I would still say it is an amazing role to get into, because the trade-off is so it's so high that once you the amount of learning that this role will give you, it is unparalleled, right? Because you have that sort of amazing vantage point to see how firms of that sort of scale, that size, function, how leaders think. So all said and done, I would definitely say that this is a role which is worth all that stress and all that effort as well. But to answer your question, who are the kind of people who should not get into this role? Like I said, if you are somebody who thrives in a structured, setting, who is not comfortable with things changing at the last moment, you will find it difficult in this role. I'm not saying that you shouldn't get into it, but in most organizations, you will find it challenging because as much as you try and plan and create plans A, plan B, plan C, to, have that contingency measures in place, things are going to change. They're always going to remain fluid and dynamic. So if that is something that you're not comfortable with, I will definitely ask you to take a step back and question if this is the right thing for you to do. And secondly, I think you have to be very clear in terms of why you are getting into this role, right? So a lot of people who get into this role sort of feel that just because you're working with the CEO, this is a way for you to catapult and get like an advancement into your career simply because you know the CEO so well, which is definitely not how it happens. Yes, you get an accelerated growth, but that is by the function of how much you end up learning, and it also depends on you how much you are able to implement that learning eventually. So if you talk about an accelerated growth, that is where it will come from, not because you will suddenly get catapulted into another level simply because you work with the CEO so closely. That's not how it happens. So you need to be very clear in terms of why you are getting into the role. Like I was very clear that for me, I was getting into this role to learn. That was my primary objective, that I get to learn as much as I can in 2 years so that I can take it back to my business and sort of help my clients through all that learning that I have gained as well. And similar to anybody who's getting into this role as well, I'll urge them to take a step back and also think what is it that they are looking to achieve out of that. As long as these couple of things are clear in your head, I think you will, you'll be able to get the best out of this role.
Ritika, one thing here is the career progression once you get off this role. Also, a lot of people just didn't even know what this role is all about. Some people thought it was something related to do with HR. Some thought it was, a glorified EA, and it is none of those. So what's the career progression? Somebody who is in that role, or somebody who's aspiring to be in that role and spend like 3-4 years of his life committing to that cause, where how can he see himself progress through the organization or through his career?
Yeah. And your first sentence reminded me of the dialogue that I got from of what my CEO told me when I got into the role. That he said that there are days wherein you'll feel like you are the CEO of the firm, and then there are days wherein you feel like you're an overpaid secretary. So you need to be clear about that.
True.
So I think when you talk about progression, like I said, before you get into the role, you have to understand and know for yourself what is it exactly are you eventually aiming to get to, right? So chief of staff also exists as a career path, right? There are people who end up being career chief of staffs who will eventually do roles like the CEO maybe at some point of time. And then there are people who get into the chief of staff role to learn and then get back into the business. So the way, for example, it works in my firms, all of the people who have been the chief of staffs before me, right? So the first chief of staff that we had is now our current CEO in the firm. Then we had a gentleman after him who has his own company now. He's the CEO of his own firm. And the person before me, he's a senior director in the firm. So the way it worked in my firm has been that, you end up being in this role for 2 years. And then you move back into the business basis, the requirements, basis the kind of skill sets that you have learned in the, during your time as chief of staff. And you sort of try and incubate something there back in the business, right? So that is one way in a lot of organizations that have these kind of talent development programs. That's how it works in most of those organizations. The way it works in startups, frankly, as much as I am aware through the people that I have worked with or I'm sort of acquainted with, it's effectively like some places it could be effectively a CXO role, which is essentially the proxy CEO of sorts. In some places, again, even mid-sized startups are looking at this role as an integrator role who will eventually rotate into a leadership position and then, somebody else will come into that role. So that's something I think you need to understand before you get into the role on what is next for you. Are you going into it as a career chief of staff, or are you and you want to get out of it and eventually get back into the business and utilize the skills that you've learned over time?
Awesome. I have one more question coming to my head, which is about managing that relationship with one person who is the most important person in your life, at least for that point in time. And disagreements happen with people all the time. Can you afford to have disagreements with somebody in that position? And if you do, how do you manage it? How do you communicate, that discomfort that you might be having or having to face? And how do you build that relationship with the CEO is what I'm trying to understand.
I think, trust is very important for both sides. I would say I'm very lucky in the sense that I have a CEO who's very receptive to any sort of, disagreements as well. So I'm very open, frankly, in terms of sharing my opinions around things, around certain aspects. And the area wherein I bring the most perspective is for him to sort of, I share a lot that, the kind of communication that is, let's say, going out from the office of the CEO, how would an employee in the firm react to that? So that perspective, it's easier for him to get from me, than anybody else. So I think to answer your question, how do you build that relationship? I think just trust is important on both sides. The fact that I trust my CEO enough that if I'm sharing a dissenting view, that is going to be heard, acknowledged, and not being held against. And that the CEO also trusts that when I'm coming from a different point of view, I'm coming from it, with certain amount of information at my hand. But at the end of the day, I also realize that as much as I push back, the eventual call is that of the CEO, and I know when is it that you need to draw that line, and when is it that you understand that, okay, there's a certain decision that has been made, and now it is my job to make sure that that gets implemented. So I'm very open in terms of sharing my opinion, in terms of sharing my perspective, but I'm also, I also understand when is it that as the chief of staff, I sort of, kind of draw that line.
When to let it go and when to take the calls.
Yeah, kind of, it's at some point of time you realize, okay, this is a decision point, and this is what it is, and you eventually end up get tasked with executing it as well.
Awesome, Ritika. Thank you so much. I think you shared a ton of gold here. A lot of things that I learned personally from this conversation. So thank you so much.
Okay.
And
thank you so much.
I just want to close asking you if there is something that I should have asked and I did not.
I think we focused a lot on, Rohit, on who should not get into this role, but I would also like to focus on why you should get into this role. And
why don't you answer that question? Why should somebody get into this role?
I think
Simon Sinek's why.
I think for me, I would, if I were given this opportunity again, I will again, make the same decision that I did. And I would say this is an amazing role if you are somebody, like you said, with that growth mindset, who is looking to learn, who is looking to. It's a very humbling role, I will say. It opens your eyes to the things that you suddenly realize. Specifically, if you're coming from a mid-management kind of a role, you suddenly realize there is a lot of things that you still don't know, right? There's still a long way for you to go. And it's good to get those reminders, specifically in that early stages in your career. And for that reason alone, I think it's an amazing role to get into, just so you can sort of, remind yourself that there's a long way for you to go and learn from the best people that you can, right? Working with the leaderships, working with the seniors, and just having an open mind to learn. That reason itself is an amazing role to get into. So if you're considering it.
I fully agree with you. I think a lot of times, working in management consulting when I was there, sometimes I used to feel, why is my partner making me do this? Like, why? And it used to frustrate me at times. But then, as I moved out of it and I started my own company, and I realized that I can't be telling all the people under me all the time what they are doing and how does the dots connect. I should do that, but there are times when I can't. So as somebody who is there executing, eh, I think this role will help you empathize with people who are at the top and recognize the challenges that they also face, and then how you can then connect the dots all the way and figure out how you're, because you need to feel wanted wherever you are. That's the most
Yeah,
important thing, and that brings that
absolutely.
clarity in your head with respect to the purpose or the why of it.
Exactly. I think, and that's from, you understand how to get the big picture, and sort of try and break it down from there. So that kind of learning, that kind of knowledge you start developing when you get into roles like this, just how to look at the big picture and not just focus on the siloed efforts. So
Ritika, thank you so much for being a part of the show. I'm so happy that you took the time out and shared your
thank
experience with us.
thank you so much, Rohit. Thank you for having me. I had a great time as well.